what is the population today compared to the population at its peak? Do you know that? I don't know if you have that data or not memorized, but and B, what is the cause for the decline in population?
Yeah. Specifics numbers wise, I couldn't tell you. I mean, we don't operate on total numbers for when we operate with our electrofishing data, what we call catch per unit effort. It's an index essentially. It's an estimate.
It's a sample.
Yeah, exactly. So we can compare those numbers, which are the way we collected them is simple over the years, pretty standard over the years. So we can compare them from 2000 to now and see what that number was.
It's a relatively fair, accurate.
It's so we can see
on
those,
a sample size.
Exactly. So we can see those trends over time, be it declining, increasing, et cetera. So obviously, like I said, the numbers are down from what they were.
I mean, from its peak, are we like half? Or do we know? Or do we not know?
Not quite to half, but it's
approaching half population-wise of what it was at its peak.
Yeah. And to go along with that, what's causing it? The biggest thing is the lack of vegetation. I mean, I realize that too. I won't deny that. Vegetation promotes stronger year classes. You have better year class strength, better survival when there's vegetation. Every lake, because this almost goes back, I get asked a lot, why aren't y'all stocking more fish? I mean, we stock a ton of fish in here to begin with, but there's only so many fish that a lake can support. There's a carrying capacity. No matter what it is, for just standard numbers, say the carrying capacity is 10 at a lake full of vegetation. You remove that vegetation, it physically cannot support as many fish because there's just not as much cover, habitat, everything. So the
oxygen levels drop. Yeah. I mean, food levels drop for the baseline of the food system with the bait fish. Like when you don't have all that grass and it's not collecting all that and growing all that algae on it, well, then the bait fish don't have as much to eat. And,
I mean, it's everything. I mean, the biggest thing, like I said, the biggest part of the vegetation to me is the year class strength. We don't have our spawns are not as strong when there's less vegetation.
So in 2015, spring of 2015, the lake came back up. Have you seen increases in numbers? I mean, now we're 5 years.
Yeah, and that's we saw right after that we saw a giant spike, as you'd expect. That new lake effect. Our numbers shot back up to comparable to what we saw historically for a little bit. They've kind of gone back down, but stabilized. That's one thing. A big take home I have right now is stable. Stable's better than declining, and our numbers have looked really comparable from 2017 to now.
Yeah.
Almost identical down to when we do.
When you guys just shocked this week.
We just shocked it this Monday.
Yeah.
So, and literally to within one fish, they were, I think, the exact same numbers as our survey last fall.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does it appear that the overs in these tournaments are underweight compared to what they used to be?
Well, the last couple tournaments they have been, right? But think about where we are in the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it.
Spring versus
Lake Fork is such a weird place because, and I deal with this on an almost daily basis because of expectations. Okay? Lake Fork, if you have a big bass tournament here and nobody catches a 10-pound fish, everybody's like, well, Lake Fork's dead. I mean, that's what you'll hear. Lake Fork's dead if you don't catch a 10-pounder. Hey, at the same week that we had the Berkeley Big Bass going on and a 7-pounder won the tournament, and it was the only over.
Right.
That was weird, right?
Real weird.
That was weird. That's odd for here. That's odd for here. That exact same week, one of the other lakes in this country that you could argue has maybe been over the last 3 years, you could make a really good argument for this lake to be the best trophy bass fishery in the country, is Lake Chickamauga. Okay? Our own Lee Livesey. Whoop, whoop. Everybody, Lee Livesey, round of applause. Congratulations, Lee. Hey, he won that tournament. But they were catching like 13 pounds a day on Chickamauga. Some of the best anglers on the planet. Nobody caught one over 5 pounds. There was one 5-pounder was the biggest fish of the tournament with fishermen that don't want to hurt anybody's feelings that fish to Berkeley. Those guys are better than y'all. Like a lot better than y'all. Like people don't realize how good these guys like Lee are. They are light years ahead of you.
Hey, we had a north wind, man.
So did they. You had very similar conditions on two similar types of fisheries, really. You really are very similar types of fisheries.
So many 6-pounders getting.
Well, I understand, but you got to think about what time of year you are, weather patterns. They don't always bite good. You're going to have ebbs and flows in fishing. It doesn't mean there's not a bajillion double digits swimming in this lake like there always, well, not always, but like there has been for the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Like they're still out there. But when we get tough fishing conditions and it lines up with a big bass tournament, like Lake Fork's the only place on earth that lives to the standard it lives to. If you have a big bass tournament on Lake Fork and nobody catches a 10-pounder, the lake's dead. Don't even bother going anymore, guys. Lake Fork sucks. What? We had amateurs catching.
When I go out now.
We amateurs caught a 7-pounder for big bass in that tournament. And how many 8-pounders were caught that were in the slot that weekend?
Who knows?
How many 6 and 7-pounders?
One because it was brought in.
So there was one. Somebody brought in a slot fish trying to weigh it, right? So, and how many 6 and 7-pounders that were in the slot were caught that weekend? We don't know. What we do know is it was probably at least 10 or 15 or 20. It was probably at least that many.
I mean, I heard a guy caught 11 and it was under. You know, who knows? I mean,
That is possible out here.
it is possible.
That is possible out here. I've seen many. I have seen several.
You know?
I've had several double-digit 10-pound fish in my boat that were slot fish. I've had that several times.
We've had
But my-
Sharelunker that were in the slot.
That's right.
We've had fish
That's
over
right.
13 pounds.
That's
that
right.
weren't 24 inches.
That's true.
100%.
So, yeah,
Football.
she's tall.
Yeah.
She's tall. My point I'm trying to make here is a weekend tournament with a bunch of amateurs. We caught who knows how many, probably at least 10 or 15 or 20 fish, bigger than anything the pros caught on Chickamauga, and we're all wondering what's wrong with the lake. Nothing. It's still the best trophy bass lake on earth. Still.
And was it last year that the Skeeter owners broke their their own record for the number of overs that came
Yeah.
in?
That's right.
I mean, I always look
Mega
at that.
Bass did too in
Yeah.
July.
And
Yeah.
Crazy.
and it wasn't what
22, wasn't it?
Yeah.
just a couple of springs ago that we had 2 over
Yeah,
11 that came in
yeah.
the same tournament.
Yeah, those 20 some odd overs at the end of July for mega bass, they didn't disappear since July.
I had an 8.6 that was 23 and 7/8. You know.
Yeah. So I mean,
6-pounders.
I get what you're saying completely on those skinny overs, but
Yeah.
exactly, especially a sample size of 1 from this tournament. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about it. If they brought in 20 overs and they are all less than 7 pounds. Yeah,
But traditionally, this time of year, right after turnover and stuff, we always see some skinny fish
yes,
this time of
normal.
year.
It's just like going back on oxygen and everything else. There's some weird oxygen levels in certain parts of the lake. The fish in general are stressed right now until the lake stabilizes from that turnover,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Which I think we're kind of in the process of, because we are starting to catch fish that are really fat, but we're still catching some that are really skinny. Like even in my boat, like that's what's happening. We're catching some that are really look great and some that really look sad.
And there's forage in the lake. There's not a. I mean, I know there is not a shortage. I don't think you can go anywhere in the lake, turn on your graph, be at 3 feet of water
So you
or 30
go,
feet.
you go to all these other lakes. Have you been to any other lake that has a forage base that this lake has?
In all honesty, first time I've actually been on the lake since I've been part of this district. We shocked Pat Mays of all places on Wednesday. It was pretty comparable to this lake and Pat Mays.
A lot of bait fish.
Wow.
But there weren't any predators in the lake, so that's part.
That's
of the
why
reason.
the bait fish are
There
there.
was a ton. There was a ton there, and
What is
this
that, 6,000 acres? Pretty small.
about 6,000 acres, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
the
small.
shad were incredibly thick there. Here, no, we've got predators and we've got bait. I mean, we've got it all. The biggest thing lacking in this lake right now is that shallow water habitat.
The
I mean,
grass.
it really is. We've got everything else there. And luckily, like I said, we're still stable where we're at with the habitat conditions we've had since 17. Our population, I told some other folks recently, I was like, to me, this is kind of our norm, what we're seeing right here, right now, where we're at. If things don't change at all, this will maintain where we're at.
I got you.
This
This
to
is
me, that's pretty good.
That's
I mean,
this is what Lake Fork. Yeah, catching 30-something fish over 24 inches in a tournament
yeah, that's pretty. That's
in a
pretty good.
weekend. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's extremely impressive. Kicking out the amount of giant bass this place kicks out, which is, I mean, heck, you can't even count it. Like this again, like the only place on earth that this happens. I mean, there's probably somewhere else this happens, but like how many 10-pounders get caught that nobody even hears about? You catch a 10-pounder on most lakes, everybody's going to hear about it. Out here, it's just like, oh, hey, good job. And then there's nothing else said.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
catch
that's
a
it.
bigger one.
Yeah, great
The
job.
other thing they're saying is, get it back in the water where I can catch it.
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it's just not headline news when somebody catches a 10-pounder out here. It's not.
No, not even close. And
I'll tell you something. That I was down there with them today and walked through the whole facility, and I've been there before. It's been years ago, but I've been there to the Fishery Center before. And if you haven't gone, you really should go. They've got a really cool, which I think y'all are closed right now, right? The Fishery
Yeah,
Center is
it's,
closed.
we're redoing a few things, and yeah, COVID's kind of
COVID shut it down. But when it opens back up, you should really go, man. It's like a little bass fishing museum, and fishing of all kinds, but primarily bass fishing, of course, museum. And they've got just some awesome exhibits there. One thing they have is they've got a wall mount that has the top 10 bass ever caught in the state of Texas. Right? Now, that's a big point of pride for all of us here, right? Because guess how many of them came from right here? Who knows how many?
8.
9.
9? Is it 9? I thought it was 8.
9 out of 10. I was over looking at the wall. I'm like, Lake Fork, Lake Fork, Lake Fork, Lake Fork. Does anybody know the only fish that's in the top 10 that was not caught at Lake Fork? Anybody know what lake it came from?
Canada. Pink.
Sam Rayburn.
Y'all are never going to get it. Gibbons Creek.
Gibbons Creek. That word.
Gibbons Creek is the only one in the top 10 outside of Lake Fork. Isn't that crazy? Think about that. Process that for a second.
Where is that?
Gibbons Creek, Central Texas. It's a power plant lake. Or it used to be. I don't know if it still is or not.
honestly, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fork's 36 of the top 50.
Yes.
That speaks volumes to a lot of what this lake was and still is. Like I said, it.
How many 20-pounders are in?
How many 20-pounders in there?
That's a good question.
That is a question I get asked a lot. Is there a state record swimming in Lake Fork? What is your opinion? Because I know there's no way to know.
Yeah, exactly.
What is your personal opinion?
I'm on the
Because you probably have more knowledge of that than anybody.
I'm on the line of: is it theoretically possible? Sure. Is it likely?
No.
No. That ship has sailed, for lack of better words. If it was going to happen, it would have happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just that every lake has a
Peak.
peak of productivity.
Sure.
It's amazing that Fork has and is still holding on like this. A lot of lakes, 15 years is about all they get, and they go. Or
Right.
look at Lake Cooper. I mean, that lake didn't even have 15 years.
Yeah.
It was built in the 90s, the early 2000s. It was probably as good as any for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then it was gone. Dead.
Even the all-time fisheries like Rayburn and Toledo and Falcon, those are probably the other 3 biggest name
Yeah.
lakes in the state of Texas. Yeah, they have their moments. Rayburn's been in one the last couple of years where it's like, and right before that, Toledo was in one. They have their moments for a few years where they're like, man, this place is unbelievable.
Yep.
Is that because of soil content and the type of soil, like clay versus sand?
With why
The stability.
Yeah, why do they?
Because Rayburn and Toledo, like, they'll cycle down, you know, and it's still a good fishery, but it's not, you know, what it is.
Yeah, well, and Rayburn, being a core lake too, it's got a little bit more. Granted, we're getting more water fluctuations here, I think, but Rayburn, I think, has a lot more consistent. It can be really high or it can drop out, and that's part of the problem with it. And same, Toledo's old. I mean, for lack of better words, Toledo's an old lake, so it takes special things. And when it came in that big cycle before, it was because of a new lake effect.
Yep.
Toledo went through a long historic drought.
And then it flooded.
Yeah, and then it all flooded, and that's what caused that giant boom that Toledo saw.
Yes, it
How
did.
about Modark, what's your opinion of it? When's it going to open?
As far as when it opens, truthfully, I'm not sure about that whatsoever. I think it'll be phenomenal for a little while, just like every other lake. Any lake, when it, 10 years or so after it's fully opened up, it's gonna fish well, especially around here. I mean, it's gonna have the right genetics in it. It's gonna have the right climate. It's going to be a good lake. Now, how long that holds on, truthfully, yet to be seen. It's in that pretty much same watershed as Lake Cooper, so there's a chance that it's got a lot of just loose, silty black clay that is not ideal. It causes a lot of turbidity, and the lake just silts in really fast. That's a potential. Truthfully, it's yet to be seen. And we're talking.
I can tell you what. How well will the grass grow in there? I mean,
Yeah.
that literally is what it all. I mean, at the end of the day, these East Texas fisheries, North Texas fisheries, that's what it boils down to, guys. Is how healthy and how much grass and how deep will it grow and how long will it stay?
It took 20 years for Martin Creek to get grass back in it.
Yeah.
A long time.
And it doesn't have much.
Still
Now,
not much.
it has grass, but it doesn't. It's not like. I mean, there is a good long main lake stretch on that one bank on Martin Creek, but it's not like it's growing all over the lake everywhere you go by any means. There are parts of the lake that are virtually grassless on Martin Creek, big parts of the lake.
That opens up a whole other discussion that we throw around some now. And I wish we had data from a long time ago to really talk about that. But you mentioned the soil, or the, sand silt or whatever. But I often wonder about just the actual nutrient levels in our soil. I mean, we've seen it a lot of places. Hydrilla is about as bad as all of them. It can essentially eat itself out of its own home.
Just deplete all the nutrients.
Yeah, exactly. It sucks up all the nutrients, and it's tough to grow back. Hydrilla is just like anything else. Go back to your lawn example. You fertilize your lawn, it grows better. If there's no nutrients there, hydrilla needs food just like anything else. And that's just a speculation on my part that I'm starting to wonder in some of the, because it's not just Fork that vegetation's dwindled on.
Yeah,
I mean, we have
sure.
it on a lot of lakes. And I just wonder if, as these lakes age, if the nutrients in these soils have potentially gone down as well. And it's just a lot harder for it to consistently
Well, I think
grow
that is a
vegetation.
direct correspondence. I mean, we all know in nature, like everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
The health of anything is kind of the health of everything, right?
Yeah.
Like if the shad ain't healthy, the crappie and the bass ain't healthy,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And if the grass ain't healthy, the shad might not be as healthy.
Yep.
And so it's all connected. And all these lakes, like you said, have this peak, and then they come down.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that Lake Fork, for whatever reason, it had this higher peak.
Ungodly peak.
Higher peak than anything ever, and then it came down, and then it stopped, and it kind of stayed there, and it's got a little bit of this, but Fork is, to me, the most stable big lake fishery that I have ever seen. Nothing's even close to it, and the only thing that I can see just from like I say, a lot of the stuff is way above my pay grade scientifically, but from just an outsider's perspective, Fork's the biggest one that doesn't have a river in it.
A true river, yeah.
Right. Everything else has got a river. Rayburn, Toledo,
Yep.
Palestine. All these other lakes have rivers in them.
Yep.
Fork doesn't. Does the lack of a river contribute to the stability here? And just having more nutrients in the water for longer time?
I think the nutrients as themselves, I think Fork had a really fertile watershed. So it's not as much the lack of a river that maybe helped it hold on, but the watershed that Fork sat on and sits on is incredibly fertile. I make this joke a lot too, truthfully, is like, all we need to do to make another Lake Fork is build a lake around a bunch of cattle pastures. And
Fertilizes the lake.
Think about all the nutrients going. I mean, I've said that for a long time. Think about how many nutrients have been just consistently pumped into this lake. Going in, and some of that shifted a little bit over the years. We still got a lot of cattle around here, but some of that shifted. And, what's in the water and what's actually down in the sediments can be.
Is there a bunch of cows around where they're building boat art?
I don't know. Probably, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I hope that lake really shows out.
Kyle Brookshire is one of the guys that runs the Sharelunker program down there in Athens. And I got to talk with him for a long time today. We've got another video coming out where I talk with him in depth about everything that they actually do with the Sharelunker program. And let me tell you guys, I've always been an advocate and thought highly of the Sharelunker program and what they were doing and what they were trying to do. After today, what we got going on down there is unbelievable. They can take one scale from any fish that you catch out here and tell you if it's related to any of their Sharelunkers.
Yeah.
Like, that is insane, man. They've got some crazy stuff. And this was one of the other key things that Kyle told me about, which, like I say, watch the video, you'll see all the details. But they are in the process now of creating a situation where all the fingerlings that get stocked in the entire state of Texas eventually will be Sharelunker genetics, basically grandchildren. So they're taking a small portion of the fry that the Sharelunkers create, holding those back, keeping those in controlled ponds and man-made little tanks that they have there at the facility, and using those for brood stock to breed fry to stock state-wise. They haven't got there yet. Like right now, it's just a smaller percentage of the stockings are, but eventually it will be all of the stockings is the goal, will be Sharelunker descendants. That is freaking cool because they do have scientific studies that have proven that having the Sharelunker genetics in the fish does give that fish an advantage to grow bigger faster and totally bigger overall. Like, there is an advantage to the genetics. I know that's been a discussion amongst fishermen. It's been a discussion of mine. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what his genetics are. Like, what does he got to eat? What is his environment like that?
Yeah.
That matters too, obviously. But the genetics, you put the same two fish in a controlled environment, one pure Florida strain, one Sharelunker, the Sharelunker gets bigger. So the genetics do matter. Just like if your mom and dad, if your dad's 6'6" and your mom's 6 foot, you ain't going to be 5 foot tall. Odds are. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be an outlier, but odds are you're not. And just like with deer and everything else, in all species, genetics do play a role in how they grow. And so that was one of the coolest things that Kyle and me were talking about today. And I was like, when he told me that, I was like, So all of our fry that we stock will be Sharelunker genetics. Like that is,
Oh, I'm with you.
that's awesome. They're doing some awesome stuff, man. I'm telling y'all.
Well, in the Bass magazine, what, a month, 2 months ago, it said that they have determined that there are smart ones, and smart genetics, and dumb genetics.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how do you know which one they are when they're this big?
One
Will
big
you
fish
please
can have
stock
smart-
some dumb ones?
I'll tell you what, me and this crew right here.
Sharelunker program.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, me and this crew right here, we will all volunteer. I assure you, we will volunteer to go down to y'all's little rubber line tanks that have hundreds of fish per acre, and we'll all throw top waters, and the ones that bite we'll keep in the program, and the ones that don't, drain them out, baby.
Hey, you might be on something there. Yeah, I might want to get in on that too.
You want to get in on it?
Yeah.
I was talking. He was showing me all these tanks. You may know it's like 47 of these ponds, and you get up on top of the top one uphill, and it kind of is the retaining tank for water, and it feeds all the other ones. And you get up there and you look out over all these ponds. He's like, "Yeah, that's our broodstock tank, and that it goes male, female, and it's got these lines of tanks, and all of them have just hundreds of fish per acre in them." And I said, "Well, yeah, but they're like all small fish." He goes, "No, our broodstock, our females are 5 to 8 pounds." I went, "Hold up, dog. You telling me that if I go throw anything over there, anything, I'm gonna catch a 5 to 8 pounder over and over again?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, you'll catch as many of them as you want to." And I went, "Okay, so if somebody breaks in here at night, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Yeah,
I don't know who it was, but it wasn't Billy Lawson. Like
Field
it's
of dreams.
the facility they got going on down there is unbelievable, man. They've done a really good job of building that up, and I know Toyota has played a big role in helping with some of the funding and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of other players that I have no clue of, but I know Toyota's been the title sponsor on that program for a long time now. And, you know, I know Toyota's a Japanese company, but it's not. Like, they build their trucks here in Texas. So Toyota there's a reason I drive one, right? And they build those trucks here in Texas, and they are, of all the automobile brands, they are the one that contributes most to the world of bass fishing, especially here. So
Certainly.
that's good. Well, we haven't even talked about the tracking survey.
No, it's true. The good stuff.
Yeah, which we do have a very long, detailed video. Do y'all have any questions on anything? I mean, hey, you got the wealth of knowledge right here. More scientific knowledge than anybody else will ever have up here again. I guarantee you that.
You got a book of questions up there.
He's taking notes. He's taking notes. Well,
What causes the new lake syndrome?
The New Lake effect. It's essentially when a lake's gone through a drought for a long time. So Lake Fork had that, back in 2011 to 2014, 15 it really came full. But a lot of what's going on, I'm sure y'all saw, when the lake's down for that long, you get a lot of grasses and willows and everything else that grows up along the entire shoreline. So yeah, when the lake fills back up, you have a solid shoreline of cover around the entire thing. And not only do you have cover, you have a wealth of nutrients that are coming out of that as well. So it's almost like a new lake that just got flooded that had all that the nutrients.
it's kind of like the lake drains the nutrients over the years. Then when it drops down for a few years, all those nutrients get a chance to kind of rebuild. And then you put water over it again. Well, and then on top of that shallow cover, all the fry, when they go through the spawning cycle, a much higher percentage of your fry survive because they have abundance of shallow cover to hide from predators.
Okay.
That's exactly goes back to why I say vegetation is key for this.
Yes.
That cover.
There's nothing better than a hydrilla mat for fry.
No, it provides stronger year classes because there's more cover for those fish to hide in and to survive. So our survival year in year out is better when we have shallow water cover, be it willow trees, hydrilla, pondweed. It doesn't matter. Some's better than others because it grows, more widespread. But cover is cover. Anything for those fish to hide in helps.
Yeah.
When the lake was filling and we had standing trees, leaves on
Yeah.
it. and
That's a big contributor to what created the boom in the late 80s and 90s.
Yep.
What made this place peak higher than any bass fishery we've ever seen, that was a big factor of it.
It's huge. It really was.
I mean, you think about it, back then, as the lake was filling and the trees were full of leaves, there were huge areas of water that no human could even access. Like, there was fish that theoretically lived their entire life and never saw a person. You know what I mean?
And God knows who knows how big.
Who knows how
I
big.
think it's-
Yeah.
I would love to have been here back then, for sure. Just seeing the pictures makes me almost get goosebumps thinking about this lake. Then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It
just
does.
one more question. You were talking about the life cycle of the lakes, and you were talking about in the 90s, Fork was like at 100%.
Mhm.
And it sounds like now we're maybe at 70% and stable, or
Yeah, I mean,
somewhere in that
a true
area.
percentage of that. It's tough to put a true percentage, but somewhere in that. That's a pretty rough.
But then,
rough
but trending forward, I mean, what do you see? Do you see us just kind of maintaining? Or
Right,
do you-
right now, yeah. That's why I say stable,
Yeah.
and why I say what I see right now is the new norm for this lake for right now. With if water levels stay where they're at, conditions, we get that little pulse every spring like we have been, which has helped that to bring the lake up to full, so we don't get keep dropping lower and lower. If that stays the same and habitat doesn't change, which there's not a lot of habitat now, so what's there stays. I see this being stable for
And so
for a
not
while.
just fish per acre, not just, big fish per acre, but total fish per acre. How does this lake compare to Palestine or Athens or some of the other areas?
Athens is quite a bit higher. Palestine's similar, in a generalized term again. And I mean, Athens has a really high, relative, abundance of fish. Athens has, at times, I think Athens has too many fish in it.
You know what Athens also has? An abundance of grass.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like fish there. I'm just-
Yeah. I mean, exactly.
Yeah. Do you ever go to Welsh?
Honestly, I have never been.
I would
Welsh.
love to hear what your population tell Welsh.
I can tell you.
Because
pretty
there
quickly.
ain't a lot of, you ain't going to catch an 8-pounder out there.
Yeah.
But golly, when they start biting out there, when they really bite, 100 fish day is not a big deal.
Yeah.
It is insane, the number of
Vegetation.
fish out there.
Yeah.
And it's at a ring of hydrilla from 8 to 12 foot since I can remember.
Yep. And so there's no doubt the carrying capacity is higher
Yeah.
in those lakes with vegetation.
I wish you could develop a fertilizer you could sell.
That would be great.
Sprinkle around our docks.
And it's been joked about, discussed, a lot of things. The one thing to think about besides the actual feasibility is, again, this is a drinking supply, and there's
Yes.
there's limitations there.
Now, and I've heard of this on I guess private lakes, and I don't know anything about this, but I've just kind of something I've heard through the grapevine or whatever. But there's a process they do sometimes on private ponds where they lime it or something like that. Do you know about that? What is that?
A lot of times that's to augment both the pH and essentially stimulate the food chain, for lack of better words. Liming's going to balance the pH. It's going to get it more at corrective levels where your plankton blooms are going to be more strong, and it's going to bring on, pretty much stimulate that food chain from the ground up. You have more plankton blooms. You have more food for your shad or bluegill or whatever else. You have more food for them. There's more shad or bluegill overall in the lake. There's more bait for the bigger fish. So it's literally just trying to stimulate the food chain from the bottom up.
But it doesn't do anything for vegetation.
Not really.
No. And is that not scalable? Just too expensive?
Yeah, honestly expensive. The sheer concept of putting, I've never had to luckily put out lime in a lake. I've heard from people that it's
Makes water pretty.
Yeah, I guess
I've
so.
heard it's god awful. It's just beyond just doing it in a small pond. Just actually physically getting out in the water is not always a great process, and to do it on a scale like this is
Just not really a scalable thing.
no.
Gotcha.
It's unfortunately not. Like I said, we've mostly joked about things like fertilizing and this and that. So, man, that's all we need is just go sprinkle some Miracle Grow in this cove and see what happens. But it's not that easy on a
You
lake
can't
this
go
size.
you can't go put chemicals in drinking water. Period.
That's the,
End of story.
Yep.
Yeah, you just can't do that. So.
On a scale like that, again, obviously, some folks may say, "Well, you spray."
I bet I know where there's gonna be some Miracle Grow by a dock. I bet I'm gonna see a kid of Miracle Grow in his dock tomorrow afternoon. Oh my goodness! Don't worry, we won't say your name or your address. We don't want SRA knocking on your door tomorrow.
I'm gonna be tracking fish next year and see a giant bloom of vegetation on that side of the lake over there.
It just happened.
Yeah, it's water, man. I don't know.
Miracle.
Yeah, it miraculously grew.
The problem is to track every guide around.
Oh, I'd be there. I'd be parapole down every morning, 6:45.
They find grass that's all they do is run around and look for grass up there.
For sure, that's what I do. Absolutely. All right. Any other questions? Did you want to you want to talk about the tracking survey? I mean, I know we did that big long video. Are you guys wanting to hear something about the tracking survey? Yes. All right. We got it.
Yeah, I figured I could give them the
Yeah.
quick clip notes, kind of that
Yeah.
big take home, the really
Yeah,
cool
we'll
stuff
do
at the end.
we'll do all the good
Stuff
stuff.
was hanging though.
We'll do the hot. No, we won't leave you hanging. We'll do the Cliff Notes highlights version. He'll do the Cliff Notes highlights version. But if you want to know all the details of it, Monday we've got a video with all that coming. So.
Yeah. So in short, we put transmitters in 23 fish, all in Birch Creek. Right now we're pretty much every 2 weeks we're tracking 14 of those. 6 of those fish did die on us.
When did you put it in?
The end of May. So we started tracking the beginning of June. We didn't have a fish die on us until mid-July, and in all honesty, looking at it, that was our hottest month of the year. That was out of that window, and I think it would have even been from the surgery. Most likely, those fish just died from the heat of the summer or some other causes. I do know one of those fish that died was caught 3 times in a pretty short window before it died.
Too bad we couldn't have put him down there with a Sharelunker female.
Yeah. So that was actually, I'll hit on that part first really quick. That was an unexpected out of the study. That wasn't even a directive of our study whatsoever that we've seen now. Of those 23 fish we initially put out, 11 of them have been caught at least once. One of those was caught 3 times. 2 of the other ones were caught twice, and that's just what's been reported to me.
So that's telling you that from early June till October, which is, what is that, 4 months?
Yeah.
In a third of the year, like 40% of the fish in the lake are getting caught.
What's the size range of these?
Most of them are 16 to 18 inches. A couple are bigger. Biggest one being about 21 and a half inches. He was probably 5 and change when we
The
released
one
him.
that I caught was bigger than that.
And we turned down an over one time to put in because it was too hot then for us to really perform a surgery. So most of them are 16 to 18 inches, and the reason for that is we wanted to honestly see what was going on with fish as they're getting into the slot. We saw those after the lake filled back up. We saw really high numbers of fish overall in the lake. From those strong year classes. Lots of people saying, "Oh, I caught 50 fish that day," but they're all 10 to 12 inches, or and where are all these fish going a few years down the road? So we wanted to kind of see what happens. What are these fish doing when they get into the slot? And again, thinking maybe we're seeing it. The size structure in our electrofishing surveys aren't really fluctuating much. So we're seeing in there, it's like maybe these fish are learning some other habits because of all the pressure and this and that of what they're doing. So we're actually looking at how boat noise idling over these fish affects them. And even if they're not affected by that, if actually fishing for them affects these fish. So you saw me the one day. Yeah.
These guys go out and find one, and then they start trying to catch it. And I'm like, can we install that on my boat?
So
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, if we locate a fish and it's not fleeing from our boat, we know it's locked in somewhere. We actually get to make 5 casts of the fish to see if casting towards the fish, if it's moving the fish, just to see overall how they're reacting to lure presence and looking at the big picture of, is this much pressure on this lake affecting catchability?
You have a Garmin?
Live scope.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah,
So
they're looking at them too.
We're getting to look at them out. Only when it's part of it's probably just I'm still learning Garmin. Traditional sonar is no problem. Live scope's new to me. Getting it dialed in pretty good, but for the most part, under 8 feet or so, I don't see them very well. So fish, when we find them fish deeper than that, we get to look at them pretty good.
Yeah. So you tagged all these fish in Birch, and for the most part, are they mostly staying in Birch Creek?
Yes.
But then some are like,
We've had a few crazy fish. We found one that we tagged pretty far back in Birch, right? Actually, where you caught that one. One of those fish moved 2 miles north of 2947.
2946.
2946. Sorry.
Yeah.
Going.
Like almost to 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We found him 2 miles up there, randomly up on the bank in a patch of pondweed next to a dock.
He's still up there?
Well, that's I was
Is that a spot or a
yeah. I was kind of bummed we didn't get out today because
Is he just under the slot, or?
because we just had another one get caught. Had an angler call me earlier this week that caught one that was 15.4 inches long. And I've got, unfortunately, those little external tags that just identify the fish on the fish he caught had came out. But I have 2 fish in my study that are 15.4 inches long. One of them we find every week in Birch, and it's actually moving all over God's creation within Birch as well. The other one is that one that was 2 miles north. So I was really excited to get back out there today, knowing where he just caught it and see. I'd know which fish it was.
I wasn't supposed to be down there in Athens today. I was going to go on the boat with him, and we were going to go track fish
Wouldn't have
today.
been a good day.
No, we
But
canceled pretty quick.
We can't use that. They can't use the tracking equipment in the rain.
Oh.
Yep.
So what I am going to do, and what is coming up, is I'm going to do another video where I go on a tracking day or two, and possibly even a shocking day whenever we get back around to shocking time, And I'm going to get on the boat with them and video the process of that and show you guys everything that's going on when they're out on the boat. So it's I'm really looking forward to this relationship growing, because it's going to be
likewise.
some very informative stuff going to come down the pipe courtesy of these guys.
Yeah. So let's give you the big take home that I think where we sit right now. One of the things that is most interesting to me overall relates to the boat noise we were talking about. You know, I've tracked, relocated 144 fish, 144 different times where we've actually tracked the fish located its position. A handful of those were too thick in vegetation to really do anything more with, but 138 of those that I get to actually see how boat noise affects them and so on. And almost 50% of those fish were reacting to our boat coming by in some fashion. Some of them may move over 5-10 yards to another tree, but there's no denying that fish is, as we get up on it, it's getting spooky. It's
He's
getting
running.
jittery. And yeah,
He's
some of them just move down the bank. I will say, I think 20 or so of those fish, there was a ton of bait around, and most likely you could see it on live scope. These fish were probably actively feeding when we came up on them, so they were moving all over, not relating to us whatsoever. But that still leaves right at 30% of the fish that are reacting to our boat and moving around.
But big motor running? Or
It's big motor. This is mostly big motor. So there's that may influence it some, but nonetheless, there's even up shallow. There's boats idling out of creeks and bouncing off stumps and everything all the time. So the way I look at that I think is really crazy to me is that's a third of all of these fish. They're on high alert before we even pick up a rod. I mean, so that right there. I mean, that's to me is like a big take home how much noise can affect this, and that you get a fish that's not alerted, even be it on a spawning bed or anything else. They're a lot tougher to catch when that happens, and we're seeing a third of these fish are already in a more challenging spot to catch before we even pick up a rod. That's pretty cool to me, pretty interesting, and pretty, I guess, eye-opening of what stealth really can play into some of this to really improve our fishing.
It'll be interesting too once we get some of these fish in the program that we catch that y'all catch in deeper water offshore, and see the difference in how noise affects that fish versus how noise has affected this other fish. I don't want to give them all the movements. We're going to leave you hanging a little bit.
Okay.
You got to watch Monday's video to find out how they've been moving and did they move from deep to shallow or shallow to. We're going to talk about all that in Monday's video. But it'll be really interesting to see when you get a fish that you've caught offshore that's already out there in, say, May, an early mover, so to speak, and see how he is affected by noise.
Absolutely.
It is the cushion, the 15, 20-foot cushion versus the 8-foot cushion. How much difference does that make?
Oh, I'm very excited to see them. Again, as an
This
angler
is such a
myself,
cool
I'm giddy every time I get on the water with this. It's so cool.
The coolest part about this deal and what you
Xbox, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I'd track fish every day if I could with this. It's always fun.
the coolest thing about this, and I know this crew that's watching what we're doing, for the most part, we're pretty skeptical over government agencies and funding and all that and how they use the money. But, I mean, guys, these guys are literally doing this entire study for no other reason than to help us become better fishermen. Like, that's what this entire study, this tracking survey, and they're doing it on Toledo Bend as well with Todd Driscoll.
Yes.
He's the biologist over at Toledo Bend. They're doing it down there. And he's actually a very accomplished, local level tournament angler. So he totally understands the world we operate in, and he's the one running that deal down there. And we've got this guy up here, and he understands it too. And this whole program is simply to help us all get better at catching bass. I mean, that's pretty awesome, man.
Going green on the motor soon.
I'll tell you what, I'll be turning that sucker off a lot further out of the cove from now on.
Yeah.
I guarantee you. That's when we were talking about today. I'm like, okay, trolling motor way down, sonar's off. We're gonna be quiet. We're gonna start being as quiet as we
I heard
can.
that theory too about the sonar.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been. I think all of us would say you hear.
Make longer casts. Try to make longer casts when you can.
Were you seeing that the sonar was affecting them as well? Or?
The sonar,
It was just
it's
noise.
mostly the noise. I mean, it's really just the boat noise itself.
But if you ever turn your sonar on out of the water and put your head by that transducer, Bubba, it's loud. Yeah. Yeah. And water conducts noise. Yeah, water conducts noise in a big way. But that's an interesting part of the study. And as we get this study further down the road and really get the results, it'll be interesting to see the conclusion of them. Because if you think about a lake like Fork, like on a busy day, those fish are almost always hearing boat noise of some kind. Like, those fish in the back of a cove, they can hear that motor running out there in the boat lane adjacent to it on the main lake. Like, outboard motors create a lot of noise. Our trolling motors we create a lot of noise in the water, and water conducts noise so well, you can hear it from a long ways off underwater. So, on this lake in particular, especially like last weekend with the Berkeley here, man, like those fish that you're tracking in Birch Creek during the Berkeley, them suckers were like absolutely hearing some type of noise the entire day.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Well, and wouldn't that attribute to the catchability? I mean, even days or so after those tournaments?
Days or so after, truthfully, it's hard to speculate on that. You know, I can't, because we only have, you know, I can tell you right when a boat goes over, when that fish, you know, gets alerted. Obviously, then he's going to be more difficult to catch. How long he
stays on alert.
Or if it's alert, or if it's something they learn.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they learned it truthfully, you know, because there's a lot of people say, oh, there's so much noise over this lake, they just get accustomed to it, they just get used to it.
Well, then them 30% wouldn't be running from your boat.
Exactly. So that's one of the things, you know.
At a minimum, 30% of these fish are running from his boat. At a minimum.
Yeah.
30% are running from his boat. That's a pretty big percentage.
Can we explore that a little? So you're doing most of this research up in Birch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all in Birch.
And are you past 514 Bridge, or you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the furthest we go back. Well, if we found one fish back almost right to the second poles, power lines going across.
Is that boat beat up?
Yeah, well, our boats are made to handle that a little bit. Yeah, luckily he was just back there one time. That's one of our fish that's been roaming all over. That fish actually 2 weeks later, pretty cool, was all the way outside of Birch in the mouth of Lake Fork Creek, where there's that hump that makes that big bend, sitting out over about 30 feet of water. He was suspended out in open water right by that 2 weeks later. And he's a 15.5-inch fish. I don't have any rhyme or reason or why he did that.
Like a young buck in high school.
Yeah.
You know, I've read up on some other fish movement surveys, and I'll tell you, and I knew that this was going to be a factor of this survey too. In every fish survey they do, we talk about it all the time. They do dumb things for dumb reasons. They're not smart animals. They don't have a very big brain, and some of them are going to do things for no good reason. They're going to travel if you look at any fish tracking survey, there's always fish that are just all over the place, and there's always fish that don't hardly get off that couch in every one of them. Now what you got to do is take that as the outlier and look at the general, right? Like, look at the average. What's the average fish doing? What are most of the fish in this study doing? Because, you know, you can't base your beliefs on how fish move based on one crazy one that's running up the Highway 19. Right. You need to base your beliefs on what the majority of the fish in this study are doing. And that's what we're going to reveal. We're going to talk about some of that you already have found out in Monday's video, but as this study goes on, we're going to learn more and more about that.
Certainly.
Because we haven't even really got to, like, have these fish done some migrating in the fall. We were, like you said earlier, Jake was hoping that we would get to maybe see if some of these fish have started the fall migration that we all talk about. Is that happening with these fish they're tracking now? Because it's about time for it to start happening.
How much longer will it go on?
We're hoping total of about 2 years, maybe a year and a half or so more. It all depends on the battery life of those little transmitters. They should last about 2 years, so we're going to track until the batteries die.
And then you're planning on maybe throwing a few more in the program in the spring, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm very much want to get in some of those deep fish to really get some of that. You know, I just for the fear of them dying on us in these colder weather temps that we had happen before. I don't want to dive into that now.
Yeah, we talked about this in Monday's video, but when they first started, Todd Driscoll there at Toledo Bend implemented some of these trackers first, and they did it in a colder time of year, and they had a 100% mortality on the fish they put trackers in. Every one of them died. So they had to rethink kind of what they were doing and how they were doing it. So
I just want to follow up on that boat noise deal. So you're back at Birch, where it's not terribly deep back there. How close are you getting before
they react?
Yeah.
And it varies. I'd say there's been a couple cases where 20 or 30 yards away, you can tell. Most of those are fish that we've had a pretty good beat on consistently, so you kind of know where he's going to be when you pull up, and he moves. On average, it's getting close to him. It's from me to you. When you really start seeing them, like some fish that just completely haul down the bank or start. Suddenly he's there now. He's 10 yards over here on this stump.
Makes sense when
These
you
guys,
graph now
they
and
can
you
throw it a
mark
mile,
and you
they're-
go back.
There ain't, you don't catch nothing.
They're
Yeah.
gone. You know?
Well, and I think, I thought I related a lot of what me and Jake discussed earlier today to sight fishing. A lot of that range is very much similar to what happens with bedfish. There are some that will run from a further distance, but a lot of the ones that aren't really catchable, that are going to run, that aren't going to lock in, it's when you get about that distance, or maybe a little bit closer, but about that rough distance is when those fish let you know you're not going to catch them. They,
Before you put the power pole in,
yeah,
they're gone.
yeah. When you get that distance, when you first can see them pretty good, and that's about the distance usually out here that you can start seeing them. When you first see them pretty good, that's when and those fish that when you can first see them, but when they leave and they don't come back for a while, hey, that's not when we stop on. Now that fish may leave and come right back to that bed, and then we can get into the sight fishing discussion. I've done that at detail before. We'll do it at detail again right before sight fishing season, but that is usually the distance you see most of them start to move at on beds too. So it was interesting to hear that even when they're not on beds, he's seeing very similar reactions to these fish throughout the year. We think of that as a sight fishing deal because they're so shallow. If you can see them, they can see you. Maybe that's not really what it is. Maybe it's just the boat noise that we're making, and the proximity is making those fish move because it does it when they're not on a bed. Mm-hmm. It's all very interesting, eye-opening stuff, and once we digest it and learn how to adapt to the new knowledge, it's all going to make us better fishermen. No doubt about it. So.
Good stuff.
Very good stuff. Well, Jake, I cannot thank you, and I know you got a couple of your new guys here with you. Man, you guys have been with us all day. Hey, I appreciate you taking time out of a Friday night to come up here, and it's obvious that you are very much passionate and into the same thing that all of us are, because you wouldn't be here on your Friday night. You have no incentive to be here, but I appreciate you coming. I really look forward to the relationship that we will develop over the next however long we're doing this, years or whatever. I really look forward to working with you guys and getting some good info out there to all of our fishermen in the area. So also, big thank you to Lake Fork Marina, and most importantly, all you guys behind the camera and all you guys in this room. Y'all filled the upper room up. We appreciate you guys showing up for this tonight, and I sincerely hope that it was informative and helped you guys, and we'll do this some more. As we get further down the line in the study, we'll get Jake back up here, and maybe we'll get Kyle up here to talk about Sharelunker sometime. That'll be good. He's got a lot of great information too. So thank all of y'all very much. We'll be right back here in 2 weeks. Come see us.